Hi, my name is Stephanie Ritter, and I'll be doing my interpersonal communications project. Next slide, please. Stewart defines interpersonal communications as the type or kind of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. Next slide, please. Throughout this course, we've talked about enlarging the conversation, specifically identifying needs and then finding the resources to meet those needs. And by doing this, we broaden the conversation to encompass another's thoughts and understanding. Next slide, please. My overarching goal to better my interpersonal communications includes 1, to become an empathetic listener, and 2, to grow in the area of self-disclosure. Listening can be categorized into 3 different levels. 1 is empathetic listening. Level 2 is hearing words, and level 3 is listening in spurts. So on level 1, as an empathetic listener, I'd like to be present in the moment by acknowledging and responding, by listening from an I'm okay, you're okay attitude, and by listening from the heart. Usually, I function on a level 2 or level 3 listening. Level 2 listening is hearing words, but staying at that surface level, hearing logically, but staying emotionally detached from the speaker. Level 3 listening is listening in spurts, while sometimes faking the listening, and also thinking of rebuttals. The other goal is to grow in the area of self-disclosure. Stewart talks about self-disclosure as openness. And he says, to build good relationships, you must be both open with other people and open to others by listening to their disclosures in an accepting way. He also talks about openness as dependent on self-awareness, self-acceptance, and trust. Gilbert talks about openness as a deep of form acceptance of another and a commitment to a relationship. Next slide, please. At the beginning of this course, we took several assessments to find out our personality blend. And one of those talked about 4 different profile temperaments. The first profile temperament is signified by the letter D, and these are people who are active and task-oriented. And words that would describe those people are domineering, directing, demanding, determined, doing, and decisive. Then there are those that the letter I signifies, and they are active, people-oriented. They are inspiring, influencing, inducing, impressing, interactive, interested in people. There are the S's. They are passive, people-oriented. They are steady, stable, shy, servant, security-oriented, submissive, and specialist. And then the C, people that are passive, task-oriented. They are cautious, contemplative, calculating, competent, careful, and compliant. Next slide, please. My behavioral blends on the graph 1, which is the this is expected of me graph, what people expect of me. Dependable, people depend on me, that I'm a planner, that I'm compliant, and that I see that people want my best. And then there is the graph 2, this is the this is me graph, the unmasked normal behavior. I'm an SC or a CS, so a perfectionist and a loyal friend. Next slide, please. The strengths and positive aspects of my behavioral blend would be that I'm organized, detail-oriented, a problem solver, dependable, and loyal. And the negative aspects of my behavioral blend, that I am moody, fussy, hard on myself, experience anxiety, and too serious. Next slide, please. So 2 roadblocks that I've identified to enlarging the conversation. The first would be a problem solver, and the second would be the flat brain syndrome. I've identified problem solver as a roadblock to being an empathetic listener. And I've identified this because, especially in my field my professional field as an educator. I'm a principal and a teacher, so students come to me and teachers come to me. And since I see myself as a problem solver, this gets in the way of empathetic listening. So a lot of times when people come to me, I jump right in as that problem solver. So I'm very slow to listen and quick to give advice. So I am forming that rebuttal. I will interrupt to give advice, and I'm not really listening I'm not present in the moment. And this also puts unnecessary pressure on myself. So this is definitely a roadblock to listening empathetically. The second thing that I've identified as a roadblock is the flat brain syndrome. And this is a roadblock, I feel, to the openness. And Peterson identifies this in his book, Why Don't We Listen Better? And I feel that this is a roadblock to openness because he talks about hurt feeling residue that we have from past experience and how this really keeps us from moving to that level 2 area of communication where we don't develop the trust and the intimacy in our relationships. And so I find that this is a roadblock for me, and that I engage many times in that flat brain tango that he talks about, where I communicate from that defense and attack mode. So these are 2 of the roadblocks. Next slide, please. Noise pollution is something else that hinders us from listening, and there are 2 types of noise pollution. There's internal noise pollution and external noise pollution. Internal noise pollution are the distractions within us that take our attention away from the speaker, and this can be lack of concentration or biased listening. So with myself, the lack of concentration can come when I'm not really listening to the ideas or the words that the speaker is saying. My mind is wandering, or I'm forming that rebuttal and thinking of what I'm going to say next. Biased listening also I've experienced, where maybe the speaker has just said a hot button word, and so I've become emotionally detached from what they're saying. And then external noise pollution are the distractions in the environment. This can be room temperature, it can be noise, something that takes us, again, away from what the speaker is saying. Next slide, please. Now we have the implementation plan to help me reach my goals. So first, for the empathetic listening, I would like to focus more on the talker's ideas and summarize mentally what the speaker is saying. This will help me keep my mind from wandering. And then listen from an okay attitude. And of course, remember the ground rules of don't give advice and don't interrupt. So this will help me from jumping into that role as the problem solver. And I've already begun to use this, especially in the professional setting. So when teachers and students come, I've refrained from jumping into that problem-solving role. And I found that when I listen from that empathetic place, that they actually really do want just somebody to listen that way, and then they start to solve their own problems. Next slide, please. For the self-disclosure goal, I have, with the help of Peterson, identified some goals, and that is to move to that level 2 communicating, going deeper than just words and developing trust and intimacy in my relationships, and also to counter the flat brain syndrome. And he mentions in his book, reduce emotional disturbance, clarify thinking, and build supportive friendships. And he has a technique in his book, and it's the talker-listener card. And you use the card to help you stay in the role of either being the talker or the listener. And this I have found to be a very non-threatening technique to be able to use. And it really does help open up in the area of self-disclosure for myself especially, and to move into that area of openness. And so I've practiced this with myself, and he suggests doing that, and then also with some of my very close friendships and my trusted relationships. And I have found that it has helped me already start to move in that area and build more supportive friendships. And so this is a tool that I will also use in the future to help with these goals. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.